You know, some wars start with a bang, a big, unmistakable explosion. But others, they start with a ghost, a phantom on a radar screen, a whisper in the dark, an event that's been manufactured to look like one thing when it's really something else entirely. Today, we're opening up the playbook on one of the most powerful and frankly dangerous tools of statecraft, the false flag.
I want you to picture this. It's August 4th, 1964. You're on the bridge of the USS Maddox, a Navy destroyer off the coast of North Vietnam. All of a sudden, the radar operators are seeing blips that just shouldn't be there. The sonar men are reporting the sounds of incoming torpedoes. The tension is skyrocketing. It looks for all the world like a second unprovoked attack in just 2 days. The call goes out and the entire world just holds its breath.
But here's the thing. Even in the middle of all that chaos, the guy in charge, Captain John Herrick, had his doubts. Just hours later, he sent an urgent message questioning the whole thing. He didn't see any enemy ships. The pilots flying overhead, they saw nothing. Which brings up a pretty terrifying question. What if the attack never actually happened? And that, right there, is the central question. Because that phantom battle, those radar ghosts, became the excuse for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution that gave President Johnson the green light to escalate a conflict that would end up claiming millions of lives. This wasn't just some mistake, it was a pretext. It was a textbook example of a false flag. So yeah, let's dive into this.
So what exactly is a false flag? Well, the name actually comes from the old days of sailing, when pirates would fly a friendly country's flag to get close to a target ship. Then, at the last second, they'd hoist the Jolly Roger and attack. In the modern world, it's basically the same idea. A government or some group carries out an act and makes it look like someone else did it. And why? All to create an excuse to go to war, or to crack down on their own people, or just to manipulate public opinion.
Now you have to understand, these events aren't just random acts of chaos. They often follow this chillingly effective playbook, a set of calculated steps that are designed to turn public fear into political power. It's all about creating this strategy of tension, right? To make people so afraid that they'll agree to pretty much anything.
The process itself is almost deceptively simple. First, you create an incident. Could be a bombing, an attack, maybe a riot. Next, you flood the zone with disinformation to completely control the story. You might even create fake movements, phony activist groups or religious leaders, just to make your story seem more believable. And then, the final step, you point the finger, loud and clear, at whoever you wanted to blame in the first place.
And the tools they use to pull this off? I mean, this is where it gets really audacious. We're talking about everything from black propaganda, that's lies that look like they're coming from a totally different source, to literally staging terrorist attacks. One of the most shocking examples ever was Operation Northwoods. This was a 1962 Pentagon proposal to bomb U.S. cities and sink American ships, just to create a pretext to invade Cuba. Now, President Kennedy shot it down, thank goodness, but it just goes to show how far some people were willing to go.
Okay, so this playbook isn't just some dusty old theory in a file cabinet. It's been put into practice time and time again with absolutely devastating real-world consequences. So let's look at a few key examples to see exactly how this works. Let's rewind to 1953. In Iran, the CIA and British intelligence wanted to get rid of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. So they launched Operation TPAJX. They had CIA agents actually pose as Iranian communists and carry out attacks, including bombing the house of a major religious leader. The goal? To turn the public and the clergy against Mossadegh by blaming the violence on his supposed communist allies. And you know what? It worked. It led to a coup that put the Shah in power and basically planted the seeds for decades of instability.
And this brings us right back to where we started, the Gulf of Tonkin. Now, the first incident on August 2nd, that one did happen. It was during a U.S. intel gathering mission. But the second attack on August 4th, the bigger one, the one that was actually used to pass the war resolution, that one almost certainly did not. It was a phantom battle, cooked up from bad weather and nervous sonar operators that was deliberately used to justify a war.
And here is the cost of that ghost story, the Vietnam War. A conflict that was escalated based on a phantom pretext, and it led to the deaths of over 58,000 Americans and an estimated 3 million Vietnamese.
The playbook didn't just go away after the 60s. It adapted. After 9/11, to fight anti-American sentiment in the Middle East, the CIA actually launched a program to create and bribe phony Muslim clerics. These fake mullahs were paid to issue fatwas, religious rulings,
that just happened to support a more moderate, pro-American viewpoint. They even urged Iraqis not to resist the US invasion. It was a direct and pretty cynical attempt to manufacture religious consent.
So what happens when the truth starts to trickle out? What's the real price of all this deception? Well, these short-term tactical wins almost always lead to long-term strategic disasters. The blowback from these deceptions can last for generations, creating these awful cycles of violence and distrust.
And the consequences are really severe. At home, it leads to this deep-seated mistrust in the very institutions that are supposed to protect us. Abroad, it just creates chaos. That 1953 coup in Iran, it directly paved the way for the 1979 revolution and decades of hostility. And maybe the most dangerous part is that the playbook itself gets out. It gets adopted by everyone, from terrorist groups to domestic political campaigns.
Because behind all the strategy and the geopolitics, we can never, ever forget the human cost. These manufactured conflicts, they aren't just theory. They have very real and very deadly consequences for millions and millions of people.
So how does this playbook even operate in the world we live in today? Well, the tools and the tactics, they've evolved for sure. But the basic principles of deception, they're exactly the same. The theater of war has just moved online.
Think about it. Instead of fake radio chatter, we now have deep fake videos. Instead of planting articles in a few newspapers, you can deploy armies of social media bots to amplify a story. Hacked servers and data leaks can do the job of paid protesters, and a staged cyber attack can achieve the exact same goal as a staged physical one. You pin the blame on your enemy to justify whatever you wanted to do next.
And the goal is exactly what it's always been, to manipulate public emotion. As this quote puts it, it's about whipping up a hurricane of hostility until people feel like they are in imminent danger. It's designed to short-circuit our rational thought and manufacture consent for actions that otherwise people would probably never support.
And all of this leaves us with a really deeply unsettling question. We started this whole thing with the ghost ships of Tonkin, phantom vessels that launched a very real war. So knowing that these playbooks exist, knowing that deception has been used to justify conflict time and time again, how do we tell the difference between fact and fabrication when the drums of war start beating today?